Remember Prisma, the ORM that I was really hyped with when I started my channel? The core of the T3 stack, the first really good TypeScript experience for databases? I haven't talked about it much recently, and there's a reason. I moved to Drizzle. Almost all of the apps I've been building have been using Drizzle, but there are things I've missed about Prisma. The one I have missed the least is the performance, which is why the title of this video might be confusing to you, because you would think, well, if you want it to perform as well as possible, you should absolutely be using Rust, which is why you might be confused about the moving from Rust to TypeScript. But there are very good reasons, and you might be surprised by them. The Prisma ORM manifesto is a very interesting document that spells out an actually pretty exciting future for Prisma that makes it a much easier recommendation for me, and not just because I don't like Rust, but because Rust was probably the wrong choice from the start, and they're more than willing to admit it now. We're going to go really deep on all of this in just a moment, but first, let's hear from today's sponsor. SingleStore, the last database you'll ever need, and I mean it. These guys are cool. They're a combination of SQL, JSON transformations, your crazy analytics and vector stuff. It's nuts how much you can do here, all with a single SQL API. I could give you all the marketing mumbo jumbo, but honestly, I'd rather let the customers speak for themselves. I have a lot of respect for Jack Ellis, and I was blown away when I heard that he was not only using SingleStore, but had moved all of the databases for Fathom Analytics over to it. As he said, they're now all in on SingleStore Helios. They've been able to remove Redis, Dynamo, and MySQL, saving them a fortune while also improving performance. And if you're worried about pricing, don't be. Its free tier is crazy. You can probably get away with it most of the time. And if you can't, their pricing is not particularly egregious. And if you're on different weird clouds, you have plenty of options here. But it's also free to self-host with Docker. So if you want to host for yourself, you can do that for the rest of your life and never have to worry about a thing. But obviously, they're hosting it really well for you. Having them manage it makes life easier. It's what I would personally choose. They did ask me to cover one thing, and this is one of my favorite details. I've said for a while that you could basically make Mongo work anywhere by just storing JSON in your database. They proved it. They made an API that's 100 times faster for Mongo operations. You don't have to change any of your code or any of your queries. You just hit their Mongo compatible API directly. It's a one-line drop-in replacement, and you're good to go. So if you're stuck on Mongo and you want a database that's a little less painful, here you go. SingleStore is pretty dope. I hope you like them too. Check them out today at soydev.link/SingleStore. Let's dive in. The ORM Manifesto, Clarity and Collaboration. This manifesto outlines Prisma's vision for the future, addressing key challenges, setting clear priorities, and empowering collaboration to build a better experience for our community. Refocusing for the future. Prisma's come a long way, and we're proud of what we've achieved together. From Accelerate to Pulse to TypeSQL and Prisma Postgres, the tools we've built have grown alongside an incredible community of devs who rely on Prisma every day. But the scope of Prisma ORM has expanded. We've faced challenges in governance, issue management, and communication. Priorities haven't always been clear, deadlines haven't been consistently met, and over time, we've accumulated over 3,000 open issues and a backlog of preview features that stretch years back. I think an important piece of context here is the history of Prisma. It originally started with a thing hopefully none of you guys have heard about, but for the few that have, I'm sorry, GraphQL. GraphQL was an attempt at making your database a GraphQL API. This was during the peak of GraphQL hype. And the goal was to make something as nice and easy as GraphQL work for your database, which never works. This meme seems to age better every day. Don't make me tap the sign. GraphQL goes between the server and the user, not between the database and the server. Stop doing this. Thankfully, unlike many of the others who had this problem, Prisma realized it. A major realization we had was that a lot of value we provided with GraphQL didn't necessarily lie in the quick provision of a GraphQL server, but rather in the fact that developers didn't need to manage their database workflows explicitly. Pivoting to Prisma. The realizations led us to a pivot which ultimately manifested in the rewrite to Prisma. With Prisma, we found the right level of abstraction that ensures devs keep full control and flexibility. This all sounds great and kind and awesome, right? The thing many didn't know is at the time, when Prisma came out, it was still using a lot of GraphQL under the hood. So it would spin up a Rust server that let you access the database via GraphQL, and then their TypeScript code would call that Rust code via GraphQL in order to get data out of your database, which was chaos. They moved off of that, thankfully, but the tech debt left behind was chaotic. And a lot of that abstraction was built because of the focus on this GraphQL API And rather than throw away all that work, they built a better tool for TypeScript devs on top of it, but they were stuck maintaining that pile of Rust, which had a lot of problems, be it the tech debt and chaos of the legacy code, be it how much harder it was to make plugins, and all these other things. It makes sense that that part is in a rough spot, which I'm sure we'll get to as we go throughout this. As Prisma says here, we want to do better, so here's what we're changing. This manifesto is a declaration of what we're going to do differently, how we'll set clear priorities, manage our work more effectively, and involve you, our community, every step of the way. If you feel something important isn't represented here, open a discussion. We're listening. For what it's worth, I've always been surprised at how down the Prisma team was to hear me out, even when I was being nasty. For full transparency's sake, despite the fact that I haven't used Prisma for a new project for like over a year now, they're still going to be sponsoring some videos in the near future because they're working on cool stuff and still want to work with me, despite the fact that I'm more than willing to critique them. So account for the bias that they have written us a check, and there will be Prisma stuff and sponsored content going forward. Like you'll have some ads from them in the near future about some of the cool things they're doing. Their willingness to continue talking to, collaborating with, and answering things from people who many would ignore. I've had a lot of brands very quickly auto-filter everything I say, and I can't honestly blame them. I'm a bit of a shit stirrer. But Prisma cares enough about doing the right thing that they are more than willing to look past that to try and make the product better. To be clear, I'm not saying you should go show up in their GitHub discussions and be an asshole. I'm saying they care so much about making Prisma good that I trust them when they say this, for what it is worth. Anyways, where we stand today. Prisma powers 547,000 repos on GitHub. It serves over 400,000 monthly active devs and delivers upwards of 9 million monthly NPM downloads. Over the years, we've achieved a lot. 200 releases, 5,500 pull requests merged, and over 7,500 issues closed. These are all great numbers, but as they say here, there's more they need to do to ensure the community feels valued and supported. With so many devs and organizations depending on Prisma, it's important that development happens in close collaboration with the community, and that the Prisma team work according to a clear and well-defined set of principles. So here's how they are changing. This first part is a big deal. They're defining first-class databases. Historically, they've been a little bit too willing to add support for new things, and I have heard from people there and people externally horror stories about implementing certain SQL-like databases that didn't actually follow the rules. They're no longer going to let themselves be slowed down maintaining all of those things. They have set this set of databases as their first-class databases. The biggest surprise here for me by far is Mongo. According to the people I've talked to at Prisma, Mongo was surprisingly easy to implement and support compared to some of those other SQL-like but not properly SQL databases. That said, I didn't expect them to go all in on it and call it one of their first-class DBs. MariaDB makes more sense because I'm sure the people using it are some of their highest paying customers, and it's very similar to MySQL, so I'm not surprised to see that. It's obviously not surprised for SQLite, but Mongo being here was interesting. In their most recent blog post, which was literally a few days before, November 27th, they introduced two new databases, D1 and Terso. They're both based on SQLite, but they are new databases. They are different things that require their own support. So my understanding is these have been relegated to community support. If I'm wrong about that, there will be a pinned comment correcting me, but that is my current understanding. Yeah. So what does it mean to have first-class databases? What's the benefit here? The key thing is prioritization. These will be the focus for bug fixes, performance wins, all of that. They won't be slowed down as a result. Innovation. Future product development will be designed with these databases in mind, ensuring seamless integration and compatibility. So if there's new features, there was a long time where new features would happen that only support one of the databases or three of them and not two of them. And it was a mess. That's going to be a lot less of a problem now that they've picked their set of DBs they're supporting. And for databases outside of the group, they provide clear points of extension to enable the community to meet their own needs. Developers can extend Prisma's capabilities by creating custom database adapters, adding support for additional databases. Guidance on building and using these adapters is available in our documentation. All sounds great. There is a catch here, but they address it in a bit. To give a hint, I'm sure you guys can imagine that the users of something like Terso and D1 are not big Rust devs. So if they needed to make this database plugin work in Rust, it's probably not going to happen. See where we're going here? Anyways, they also, and like You got to make your money. If you're one of the companies using a database that isn't supported in this set, they will work with you if you pay for an enterprise support plan, which honestly, if you are big enough that you don't want to move your database and you're on some weird database, I'm okay with you having to pay for that. I think that's fair. By focusing on the core set of DBs, we want to ensure the highest quality and reliability for the tools you depend on, while also empowering our community to expand Prisma's reach. As usage and demand change, we'll reevaluate our first-class databases to ensure they continue to reflect the needs of our community, customers, and partners. Awesome. So yeah, if some new database becomes huge, they might change their mind. Cool. Personally, if you're making a new database, I think you should be focused on building a really good TypeScript ORM yourselves. Something like EdgeDB, for example, they are rethinking how to work with a relational DB where they're going more relational instead of less. Most NoSQL databases have less relational behaviors. They have way more, and technically they're built on top of Postgres. They also provide their own SDK and ORM, including their own schema and their own schema definitions, their own CLI, their own migrations, their own everything. And I would be surprised if a new database got meaningful traction in these spaces, especially in the TypeScript world, if they didn't do this themselves, which gives less incentive for this to be Prisma's problem. Just speaking realistically. Point 2, clearer issue management, community prioritization, and engagement. This is an important call out. It's not as relevant to the point of this video, which is the Rust part, but they called out that they have not been good at managing their issues. It's nice to see open source projects do this. There's a lot of open source projects where the state of issues is horrifying. For example, Flutter. There are 12,928 open issues on Flutter, and they recently purged it. For a while, it was the repo with the most open issues on all of GitHub. So they're not that bad. They are close enough that it's scary, but at least they're not here. Acknowledging it and putting effort into fixing it publicly is huge. I can't remember last time I saw a company come out and say, we did not manage our issues well enough and we're going to fix it. It's cool to see. A well-organized set of issues helps us focus on what's most important and impactful. We deeply value the time and effort you've put into raising and discussing issues. It's what drives Prisma forward. To ensure clarity and sustainability, we're committed to organizing our backlog, closing outdated issues, and using automation to scale our ability to engage with you. So they're going to start reviewing, organizing, and closing issues over the next few weeks. Awesome. Providing timelines, labels, and priorities. I'm curious how much progress they've made so far, because this came out a few days ago. They're still at 3,002. Hopefully they're closing them much faster now. Doesn't necessarily look like it, yet at least. I'm hopeful. I think they'll get there, but it's going to be an uphill battle. They also want the community to do things like upvote and comment so they can prioritize better, as well as a partnership with Dosu. Maintaining code should be easier than writing it. It's a startup that helps you triage your issues. That's actually pretty cool. I can see this being very, very useful. Next piece is the predictable preview feature lifecycle. These are, again, things that are nice to see done so transparently. They're cleaning up the process of things going from an early feature to a generally available feature. Right now, there's a ton of things that just sit indefinitely in preview. They're finally fixing that. Awesome. But the piece you're all here for, the Rust part. Point 4, enabling community extensions and collaboration. Prisma's architecture has historically limited community contributions, as well as the places you can deploy it, as well as the performance you can expect from it, as well as the reliability. There's a lot of things the architecture was causing problems with, and they are very willing to re-architect. I've seen this from them before, but this is a bold move. Core functionality, such as query parsing, validation, and execution, has been managed by our Rust engine, which has been opaque to our TypeScript-focused community. Expanding capabilities or fixing core issues has often fell solely onto their team. We've addressed this by migrating Prisma's core logic from Rust to TypeScript and redesigning the ORM to make customization and extension easier. They finally did it. They rewrote Prisma at its core and threw out the Rust engine whose days started back in GraphQL. Finally. They don't have performance numbers here yet. They don't have the things you probably want to see. And I'm sorry, I can't tell you how much faster or slower the TypeScript engine is yet. I'm sure this will come up in future videos once they're further along with this work. But considering how much faster Drizzle is, in my experience, than Prisma, I would not be surprised if this comes with a performance win. This is something that Ryan Carniato says a lot. Ryan's the creator of Solid.js, which is the fastest JS framework. And he says that benchmarks comparing a rewrite are often meaningless because the second time you do something, you know so much more about it and you make many fewer mistakes. Even if you work in a slower language, the result is going to be faster just because you are better at doing it and you know more. So my suspicion is even though the language they picked is slower, the thing that is slow in your database connection isn't the language you wrote it in. It's the I/O and the management of these complex queries. None of that is going to be bound on the power of a single CPU thread. There's a lot of opportunity here for better architecture to result in huge performance wins. So I would be surprised if this ends up being slower. I wouldn't be surprised at all if it ends up being meaningfully faster. It'd be pretty cool if it ends up being comparable to Drizzle and other faster ORMs. I think they have a good chance of getting there. So what does this mean for Prisma? It means the core will now be in TypeScript, which is more accessible and open for TypeScript developers. It means that extensibility will now be in the design, where previously that weird way of exposing the API in the Rust part was super opaque, and they even had to work around it. Now everything is built with a focus on extensibility and plugin design, which is huge, and collaborative growth. An approachable code base empowers the community to address issues and add capabilities directly. Yes, I have looked at the Prisma code base and immediately walked out because it was terrifying. And I'm very excited to see how much more approachable this could be. It's important to make sure the solutions you're building that are open source are accessible to the people who are using them in a way that they can understand the code, make changes, and push forward. I'm concerned that this might end up being the same thing that happens with stuff like TurboPack, RSPack, etc., because we as web devs want these tools because they're really fast for our web dev work, but we as web devs won't contribute to them because they're in languages we don't understand. There are very few devs that understand Rust deeply enough and compilers deeply enough that also care about TypeScript and web dev enough to build something for web devs in Rust. Most of the people who know compilers and Rust really well spend more of their time shitting on TypeScript than they do compiling it. I'm scared there will be a similar problem there where devs don't have interest in contributing to those tools because they're in the language that they're not using. That's what happened with Prisma. It's really, really key that they caught on to this and they're making this change. And as awesome and exciting as it is, I'm scared it might be the writing on the wall that this is going to happen to the other Rust rewrites of tools that we're so hyped about right now. This is one of those takes where I hope I am super fucking wrong. To be clear, I'm not saying this because I want to say fuck Rust. I'm saying this because I'm scared, and I hope this isn't the case. That said, Prisma is absolutely doing the right thing here, and I'm genuinely really excited about it. One quick aside on that point, by the way, Naman, who's the creator of StyleX, one of the industry experts in compiling your TypeScript because he found a way to get styles out of it as a CSS file, lunatic, called out that this point is so much more important than people realize. That being the contribution aspect. Being able to contribute to these things is super, super important, and these Rust rewrites are not considered enough of the risk there. I have a video coming out soon, probably not out yet. Keep an eye out for it. The premise is why JS rewrites in a faster languages might not make a lot of sense. It's focused on the same core theme. JavaScript is, in my opinion, a working class language. It's very forgiving of types. Also, they're not a TypeScript fan, which I know makes it hard to trust them. It's easy to pick up. And since it's supported by browsers, there's a huge pool of people who are conversant with it. For years, we've had both library authors and consumers in the JS ecosystem largely using JS. I think we take for granted what this enables. Theo from the Node teams quoted saying that most devs ignore the fact they have the skills to debug, fix, and modify their deps. They are not maintained by unknown demigods, but by fellow developers. Yes. And that includes awesome things like patch package, which, to be clear, I'm not saying you should use patch package a whole bunch, but the fact that you can write a patch to one of your dependencies in your Node modules and not have to get it merged or fork the dep. You just make a few changes and now you're good to go. That's huge. It is such a useful thing. You shouldn't use it a whole lot, but at the very least, they make it easy to go file an issue or a pull request, making the change that you made here. There aren't many languages and many ecosystems that make it this easy to change how your deps work. And these are the things we throw away if we're just compiling binaries from Rust. Anyways, back to Prisma. I'm excited for them to move off of Rust because for the first time, it'll be possible to meaningfully contribute. Very exciting stuff. But it's important this is maintained, so let's hear how they plan to stay engaged. Open source thrives on collaboration, and we're making changes to ensure our connection with our community stays strong and transparent. GitHub as the core. This is an important detail. People's comms get split across so many different places, and it sucks. They call it directly here. GitHub is where all of their primary platform for everything they talk about is going to be. No more, some things are in Discord, some things are in Slack, some things are on their blog, some things are on Trello, some things are on GitHub. It's all on GitHub. Awesome. Discord will remain the place for real-time discussions, though. Yeah, the split's always scary, but at least GitHub is the core now. That's a huge change. And they're also going to be doing a monthly AMA. So you can go there to ask questions, share updates, and get feedback. Cool. A+. They also called out their guiding principles. Developer first, focus on quality, open and transparent, collaborative, and continuous improvement. Cool. These aren't empty promises. We're here to deliver. In the coming weeks and months, you'll see us organizing issues in our repo, fixing bugs, and delivering preview features. If we ever fall short, call us out. And this is a link to their Twitter, by the way. They are down to be called out. Credit to them. I have been harsh on Prisma, and they have not let that keep me from being part of the community. I have so much respect for this team. There are few people that were this willing to take that many L's about the way they were doing things before and then grow, not just for the sake of it, but to show us how to do things right and bring us along for the ride. I'm genuinely hyped to know Prisma's not going anywhere, and all the people who bet on it long ago in the OG T3 stack days are going to have a bright future ahead of them. Prisma should be great, and I am excited to say they are, as far as I can tell, on a path to greatness once again. Thank you to Prisma for all of the work you're doing here. Genuinely really appreciate it. And until next time, peace nerds.